Solar Biology by Hiram E. Butler. Introduction: The Biblical History of Solar Biology. It may appear remarkable to some when we assert that this system constitutes the foundational principle underlying the entire structure of the Hebraic and Christian scriptures. Indeed, the sole repository wherein we discern indications of the prior existence of this science, save, perhaps, within the Kabbalistic writings. Yet, from the inaugural chapter of Genesis to the concluding chapter of Revelation, we find indisputable evidence that it was interwoven with the history of the origin and life of Israel. Moreover, the sublime prophecies pointing forward to that epoch for which Jesus instructed us to pray, namely, that the kingdom of God might come, and His will be done on earth as it is in heaven, are characterized and formulated in accordance with the laws and mechanism of this system. In this treatise, we present merely a few of the primary evidentiary points to guide and assist the student, suggesting how one may expand upon them, and, through their agency, conduct more extensive research and application of these principles. For this modest work is primarily designed to render accessible the practical, personal, and professional benefits to be derived therefrom. Consequently, we do not attempt to elaborate upon the sublime dimensions, the breadth, height, and depth of this magnificent system, which far transcends the grasp and comprehension of the human intellect in its current state of development. We do, however, offer several compelling and utilitarian proofs for the benefit of the many skeptics, whose numbers are rapidly multiplying, in the hope that they may recognize and appreciate that within this ancient volume lie numerous hidden treasures of inestimable value, as yet almost entirely unexplored. In the first chapter of Genesis, we are presented with the sequence of the 7 epochs and the 7 stages of the earth's development, brought into existence by or through the Word of God. A word represents the concentration and crystallization of the thinker's cognitive potencies, projected by the will and imbued with the very essence of its author. We frequently observe individuals remarking that they have conceived an idea of a particular matter, without any comprehension of the profound natural truth that thoughts are generated, conceived, and brought into existence by the operation of the intellectual faculties as literally as our offspring, and that the identical vital essences are utilized for the former as are required for the latter. Thus, it is by no means a mere fable that God instructed Moses to say to Pharaoh, "Let my son go," or that the human mind presently, as indeed it always has, claims filiation to the divine. From childhood, we have all been familiar with the adage that we are the children of God. Paul affirmed this in its most expansive sense when he declared that by the Logos the worlds were created. The Bible offers but a highly condensed outline of the chronological sequence and epochs of development preceding the advent of the first man upon this planet, who attained the likeness and image of God in that he was able to receive inspiration, perceive the divine, and contemplate God. Thus, he stood as the sole living word or expression of the Creator, as recorded in Genesis 1:26. Consequently, he became the visible Logos from whom, we are informed in symbolic language, issued 4 rivers, a figure of speech invariably employed in ancient metaphysics to represent the generation of peoples. Thus, the 4 branches of humanity emanating from a single source conform to the pattern and order of the heavens. Upon examining the 12 signs of the zodiac, we find them partitioned into 4 principal divisions or departments, as subsequently elucidated in this science. We possess but a dim apprehension of the progression and development of these 4 rivers of human genealogy, inasmuch as there has been preserved in the sacred scriptures only a brief chronicle of the history of one of these branches. During the epoch of Abraham, we discern an endeavor to restore the divine image or Logos, an effort sustained through Isaac and manifested in external form through Jacob, thereby providing an admirable symbol of the trinity of human existence. Abraham representing the spiritual father, Isaac the soul or cognitive vehicle, and Jacob the physical manifestation and progenitor of the 12 tribes of Israel. In him was presented a prophetic depiction of the conditions currently prevailing within the world. Under the circumstances foreshadowed by this prophetic representation, 10/12 of the sons of Israel were conceived under parental conditions devoid of genuine spiritual affection. And, whether by the agency of Jacob or because the mothers were so instructed, we find that they bestowed upon the children names reflecting the true nature of all individuals born under comparable influences from that era to the present day. We also learn that these appellations not only delineate the character of children born under such circumstances, but also express the salient characteristics of individuals born under the 12 signs of the zodiac, appearing in the precise sequence of the 12 zodiacal periods. Thus, we are led to understand that they were born under the 12 mental conditions that represent the plenitude of the heavens. The student will find in this system copious evidence of the veracity of the foregoing assertion. We observe, therefore, that specific mental states are indispensable, for otherwise a child of a particular quality could not be conceived, and we find that a distinct correlation or manifestation of these qualities is registered by the configuration of the Earth and the solar system at the moment of nativity. This fact being thoroughly demonstrated, we are compelled to conclude that the celestial movements of the planets within our system perpetually exert a governing influence upon the existence and thought of the inhabitants of the earth. Upon examining the 29th chapter of Genesis, commencing at the 32nd verse, we observe, "And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben Libra. For she said, Surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now, therefore, my husband will love me." As will be observed, the preeminent characteristic of Reuben, Libra, is the capacity for foresight, vision, or intuitive perception. "And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon." This aptly illustrates the primary characteristic of the sign Scorpio, which is to hear or obey authority. And within their sphere of utility as overseers, they demand obedience. "And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi." The principal characteristic of the Sagittarian nature herein expressed is fidelity, specifically faithfulness to the marital covenant. "And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah." This possesses a dual expression. First, the significant commercial concept embodied in Capricorn, which was articulated by Solomon in these words, "Men will praise thee when thou doest well to thyself." And furthermore, that profound, interior, inexpressible, and soaring ideality which is a dominant feature of those born under the sign of Capricorn. "And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore she called his name Dan." This denotes one of the most prominent characteristics of the Aquarian nature, namely the celerity and accuracy of their intuitions, and their capacity for discerning the character and temperament of others. "And Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, conceived again and bore Jacob a second son, and Rachel said, With great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali." This excellently portrays the anxious, striving nature of those born under the sign of Pisces. And Leah said, "A troop cometh," and she called his name Gad, which expresses the functions of the cerebral Aries, maintaining the body in harmony, and fortifying and preparing it for all manner of service. And Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, bore Jacob a second son. Whereupon Leah said, "Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed." And she called his name Asher. This denotes the preeminent characteristic of the Taurus temperament, which is the joyous and self-contented state of those born under that sign. And God hearkened unto Leah, so that she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, "God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden unto my husband." And she called his name Issachar. This illustrates the principal characteristics of the sign Gemini, which are the intellectual faculties and the rewards they invariably secure. And Leah conceived once more, bearing Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, "God hath endowed me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons." And she called his name Zebulun. This expresses the primary characteristic of persons born under the sign of Cancer, as it relates to their domestic inclinations. Thereafter she gave birth to a daughter, whom she named Dinah, or Juniah. This, the 7th child of Leah, was born under the 11th sign of the zodiac, being likewise the 11th child born unto Jacob. Within this sign, a profound metaphysical principle is embodied by the very fact of this child being female. In the first instance, this implies that the sign Leo, when interiorly considered, is a feminine sign. But as she was the 7th child of Leah, 7 being the perfect number, acting as an internal exponent of that interior perception hereinafter discussed, it signifies that the interior of man is feminine, and that intuitive perceptions originate from the inner spiritual nature, as referenced by Isaiah 11:3, "And shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth." Thus is the significance of the name Dinah fully justified. Nevertheless, since the spiritual must possess a physical and external medium through which to manifest, therefore, in place of Dinah, and calculating the sign representing the physical character, Joseph, the firstborn of the beloved wife Rachel, whose birth was esteemed the answer to this long-implored event, stood as the physical expression of the gift of God to the world. And she conceived and bore a son, declaring, "God hath taken away my reproach," and she called his name Joseph. This possesses a twofold significance. First, regarding the physical temperament of those born under the sign of Leo, which expresses the loving nature and prolific generative principle. Second, we find evidence throughout the scriptures of a profound metaphysical reference to this nature or sign as a savior of the people. We find in Genesis 49:22 and 24, Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well. Again, in the 25th verse, "Even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that leeth under, blessings of the breast and of the womb." In chapter 41:41 we find, "And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt." Again, in the 57th verse, "And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn." Chapter 47:12, "And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren, and all his father's household with bread, according to their families." Thus, having preserved his people, we find Joseph offering reassurance to his brethren after the decease of Jacob. Genesis 1:19. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for I am in the place of God. We also observe among the prophets a continuous allusion to the Lion of God, which is generally understood to refer to Jesus. The writings of Isaiah are replete with such references. In Revelation 5:5 we find, And one of the elders said unto me, Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, hath prevailed to open the book, and loose the 7 seals thereof. Now, regarding the 12th son of Jacob, we find in Genesis 35:16-18, And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. This signifies the unparalleled power of the will possessed by those born under the sign of Virgo. The initial letter of the great Kabbalistic name, Yahweh, usually translated Jehovah, is in itself the symbol of the right hand in the gesture of indicating the path. Virgo, pertaining to the digestive functions and the intuitive faculty, has as its office the preservation of its own physical vessel through nourishment, which is the source of all sustenance and bodily strength. Consequently, the capacity for self-preservation and maintenance constitutes the preeminent characteristic of the sign Virgo. Furthermore, in Genesis 49, Jacob outlines the life and character of each of his 12 sons under a prophetic aspect. In the 3rd and 4th verses, he depicts both the excellence and the volatility of Libra, arising from its sensual inclinations, acute sensitivity, and tendency toward imitation. For genuine success demands elements of self-governance far exceeding mere mimicry. The temperaments of Scorpio and Sagittarius are delineated from the 5th to the 7th verse, illustrating their fiery passion, combativeness, and jealousy. The commercial acumen and refined tastes of Capricorn are expressed from the 8th to the 12th verse, demonstrating their dominion over realms and legislators, as well as the capacity of the commercial instinct to assemble populations within urban centers. The domestic inclination and mercantile tendencies of Cancer are set forth in the 13th verse. The anxious, restless disposition of Gemini, along with its calling to serve intellectual pursuits, is described in the 14th and 15th verses. The nature of Aquarius is depicted from the 16th to the 18th verse, reflected in the duplicity and contentious spirit of modern commerce. Yet, beneath it all lies an inherent desire to do right. Individuals born under Aquarius are among the most enigmatic, presenting a profound paradox. They are ruthless, yet persistently merciful, benevolent and empathetic, yet singularly unyielding and distant. The 19th verse expresses the distinctive character of Aries, namely the intellectual faculties, which have historically been suppressed in their loftiest applications by the combined material forces of the world, but which shall ultimately triumph when they are united with the intuitive perceptions. There exists no more fitting depiction of the Taurus nature than the pronouncement of the 20th verse. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. In the 21st verse is depicted the great dynamism and studious disposition of those born under the sign of Pisces. From the 22nd to the 26th verse inclusive, the magnificent destinies are expressed which Leo, as a child of love, is not only capable of achieving, but shall indeed attain. This nature remains unbound by the constraints of conventionality. The 27th verse illustrates the self-interest and defensive capacity of Virgo. Moses, who served as master and prophet to the 12 tribes of Israel in the wilderness, delivered another prophecy prior to his death, recorded in Deuteronomy 33. This chapter is entirely an exposition of the divine order that shall prevail when the prayer taught to us by Jesus is fulfilled, namely, when the kingdom of God is established upon the earth. The prophet Ezekiel likewise foresaw the ultimate consummation of this system, and the entirety of his prophecy pertains thereto, from the first chapter to the last. This will be abundantly clear to all students of this science, particularly from chapter 40 to chapter 48 inclusive. Furthermore, this system is revealed throughout the book of Revelation, and is most vividly portrayed in the description of the holy city in chapter 21. It is highly evident that Jesus, upon his advent, adopted this same course of scientific prophecy, operating in strict accordance with the metaphysics of this system. For he selected 12 men as apostles to represent the 12 signs of the zodiac, he himself standing as the central sun, whose spiritual and intellectual light was to radiate through them into the 12 departments of humanity. So vital did the disciples deem the preservation of this order that, following Judas's betrayal of his master, they elected Matthias to assume his office as one of the 12. Paul, in his epistle to the Hebrews, chapter 8, verse 5, cited Exodus 25, verse 40, writing, "And see that thou make all things according to the pattern showed thee in the mount," thereby clearly indicating that Moses received a revelation upon the mount regarding the formula for the construction of the temple, a design that mirrored the heavens, yet was squared by the perfect law of God. The temple in Jerusalem, subsequently erected by Solomon, comprised a hollow square of buildings situated within another concentric hollow square of structures. Further inward lay the inner court or court of the priests, within which stood the sanctuary. Each of these enclosures featured gates facing the 4 cardinal directions. This architectural design merely manifested in physical form that which was practiced by the congregation around the tabernacle in the wilderness. For they encamped about it in the order of their respective functions, the minutiae of which were delivered to Moses by God. Furthermore, in Revelation 21, John beheld the holy city, the New Jerusalem, and described its configuration in accordance with diagram number 7. We merely reference this here, and shall make no attempt to provide further explication at present. We leave it to each individual to study and evaluate this matter according to their personal interest in this line of inquiry. We may, at a future time, elaborate upon this subject in a treatise on theosophy. Chapter 1. Preliminary Philosophy. This system constitutes the philosophy of life in its relations to physical or earthly existence, as governed by the solar fluid of our planetary system. First, we consider man in his animal relation to the physical world. Second, in his mental relation to the physical world and the solar system. And third, in his spiritual nature and its relation to this world and the universe. Between man's physical and spiritual natures there exists a perfect line of gradation, ascending from the grosser physical to the higher spiritual, such that the mental and spiritual are wholly dependent upon the physical for their conscious relations to this world, precisely as a structure is dependent upon its foundations. We regard the physical body as a chemical laboratory. The food ingested into the stomach undergoes various stages of transmutation during the process of digestion, first becoming chyle, then blood, whereupon it is directed into the generative functions and becomes seed. This seed, through the operation of these same functions, is then transmuted into lymph, a transparent, colorless fluid. The term lymph is derived from nymph, meaning spirit, Consequently, this fluid is most appropriately designated as spirit water, or the water of life. Upon passing through these stages, it begins to influence mental states, and as it is distributed by the lymphatic system throughout the body, it induces a pleasurable sensation in all the organs. The more effectively the seed and these vital fluids are retained within the body without waste, the greater the abundance of life, health, and power experienced by the individual. Were it possible to completely deplete the body of this fluid, death from blood poisoning would swiftly ensue. An abundance of this lymph imparts a sense of repose, happiness, and contentment under all circumstances, as well as physical strength and a love of activity. This fluid assists in the formation of the bright red corpuscles of the blood and aids the lungs in their work of purification. A portion of this regenerated blood passes into the spleen, where the pure white corpuscles are formed, whence the most refined elements are conveyed through the nervous system to the brain, there to be transmuted into the subtle element of thought potency, thereby vitalizing mental action. There are three primary avenues for expending the vital forces. First, through physical and muscular exertion. Second, through mental activity. And third, through the sexual function. To whatever extent energy is expended in any one of these three channels, there will be a corresponding reduction in the force reserved for the others. Individuals possess mental energy, or lack both mental and physical power, in direct proportion to the chastity or licentiousness of their habits. In delineating character, the most critical aspect to observe is their sexual conduct. For if individuals are inclined towards self-indulgence and dissipate their vital forces and elements, they will correspondingly lack mental and physical vigor. Conversely, in proportion as they conserve these potencies and vital fluids, they will possess superior mental and physical capacity. Frequently, however, individuals of unrestrained habits draw physical energy from others. Yet, while they may thus acquire physical strength, they will lack mental clarity, precision, and an inclination toward intellectual pursuits. There is no such entity as a lazy person in the conventional sense of the term. Life is inherently active, and the inclination to act is commensurate with the volume of life force possessed. If the vital force is concentrated within the sexual function and they're consumed or dissipated, activity will be almost entirely directed toward that channel, resulting in a deficit of power in other areas proportional to this overactivity. Youths are often perceived as indolent when their vital activity is centered in this function. Children addicted to self-abuse, being abnormally active in that regard, manifest indolence in other directions, and this dissipation of vital force induces an excessive desire for sleep. Sleep is the state most conducive to the recuperation and generation of new life within the organism. The early morning hours present the greatest risk of children acquiring the habit of self-abuse. Consequently, parents should instruct their children to form the habit of rising immediately upon awakening. The dissipation of this force during childhood is a primary cause of the stunted development observed in many individuals who remain physically and mentally immature. It is observable that those individuals who, in their youth, were required by their parents to rise early and engage in physical labor, are those who achieve the highest distinctions in life. We likewise find that men whose brains are kept sufficiently active to suppress all sexual inclinations possess an abundance of vital force in both brain and body, thereby becoming physically and mentally robust. This practice also perfects the intuitive nature, which is spiritual and links us to the earthly and solar minds, thereby enabling us to cognize future events. This intuitive faculty serves as the master and guide of the intellect, while the latter acts as the servant, the artisan, the mathematician. Men and women who lead chaste lives achieve success in whatever endeavors they undertake, unless constrained by prior circumstances. For, as previously stated, this is the method by which the intuitive function is perfected. It is with man as with the spider, whose chemical nature attracts the mental elements of the solar fluid, enabling it, by means of this element, to construct that exquisite mechanical structure, the web. The mental power is not inherent within the creature, but acts through it. Similarly, when man has suffused his body with this vital element, he attracts the mental principle of the solar fluid, unites it with his intelligence, and is thus enabled to cognize many things without always being capable of explaining the mechanism of his knowledge. This is intuition. It is this same wondrous principle that alerts birds of the approach of winter's frigid storms, directing them southward for their self-preservation. Birds and beasts live in complete harmony with nature. They do not squander their sexual forces, and consequently exhibit the remarkable sagacity observed in the animate world below us. Humanity alone abuses this function, and to the extent that one does so, one is deprived of that divine guidance possessed by the wider animal kingdom. The author has made it his business to examine with care the mental and physical constitution of men and women who have achieved eminence in life, and has observed it as an invariable rule that all such individuals have been guided entirely by their intuitions, their analytical faculties remaining subordinate to this higher preceptor. To be sure, certain individuals achieve great heights and possess keen intuitions despite leading licentious lives. However, the secret of their refined intuition lies in the chastity of their parents, who thereby endowed them with a superior physical organism and intuitive mental faculties, as well as in the fact that these same individuals maintained chaste habits during childhood. Nevertheless, their powers remain far inferior to what they might have been, had they themselves observed the law of chastity. The commercial world is governed by two principles. First, love between man and man. Second, psychic or willpower of one man over another. When properly cultivated, the intuitive faculties enable an individual to perceive and comprehend the internal state of others. Thus, when two men meet on a commercial plane, they are prone to discern each other's conditions, and are thereby either attracted or repelled, or indeed moved to affection or animosity. Let us illustrate. An individual calls upon another, desiring some financial favor. Upon their meeting, they immediately feel that they can repose confidence in one another, simply because their integrity of purpose is intuitively recognized. Occasionally, men are entrusted with vast sums of money by complete strangers through this principle of confidence or love, as they intuitively perceive the capability and integrity of the party so entrusted. Young men embarking upon their careers who adopt the principles of industry, integrity, and equity as their guide, though they may possess no capital whatsoever, will experience little difficulty in securing credit and assistance in any commercial endeavor. For capitalists, possessing keen intuition, readily discern in a young man the disposition to deal justly with others, and to remain honest and upright under all circumstances, and will willingly trust them to any desired extent. Whereas, if the youth harbors any inclination to take advantage of others, or to acquire all he can without rendering an equivalent, this is immediately perceived, and confidence in him is either lost or withheld. The genuine motives and sentiments of a person's heart are discerned by those who have cultivated their intuitive faculties through a life of chastity, and they invariably feel an affinity for those of similar morality and purity. And to the extent that these conditions prevail among men of business, love remains the governing principle. The second governing principle in commerce, namely psychic power, is that force which has been conserved for the use of the brain, concentrated and projected by the will with a combative, subduing, or controlling intent. A man of potent intellect, possessing this psychological power in a highly developed state, is enabled to influence those of lesser mental fortitude, such that he actually projects into the other's mind his own emotions, thoughts, and desires, thereby suspending the other person's capacity to govern themselves by their own volition. This second domain of commercial life is one of conflict, man against man, wherein the weapons employed are psychic or volitional powers. He who possesses the greater portion of this power will triumph, compelling his fellow man to execute that which he wills him to perform. Thus, individuals are frequently induced to perform actions in business, and even in social and domestic spheres, which their most basic reason would declare to be erroneous or detrimental. Yet, under the dominant will of another, they comply without reflection. Thus, the world is governed by these two principles, love and psychic force. And those individuals who possess this sublimated life essence are enabled to rule their peers through solar inspirations, that is, by drawing in the solar mental force and projecting it, clothed in their own conserved vitality and controlling intellectual energy. A perfectly celibate or chaste life enables an individual to fashion thought forms and project them by force of will to persons near or distant, thereby achieving desired results in influencing mental faculties or even physical conditions. Thus, a person who conserves all the energies generated by the sexual function within his own body will soon be enabled, through his intuition, to understand how to heal diseased conditions in his fellow men, projecting his own vital or soul essence into the affected part to remove the affliction or to rectify the disorder. To accomplish this, one must subject the appetites, feelings, and emotions entirely to the governance of reason and intuition. St. Paul offered sage counsel on this subject, as follows: I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good, and acceptable, and perfect will of God. Again, for to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. It is necessary to subdue all abnormal excitation induced by stimulants or narcotics in order to establish an equilibrium between supply and depletion, and to foster a harmonious relationship between the individual and the divine. And as soon as one begins truly to master these conditions, one will discover, upon closing one's eyes to sleep, that consciousness persists during the hours of slumber, within whatever sphere one's affinities were engaged while awake. Indeed, unless this harmony between oneself and the causal world is secured, restlessness and distressing dreams will disturb one's sleeping hours. Many individuals who endeavor to conquer their passionate nature, so as to retain the vital seminal fluids within their own bodies, will initially encounter great difficulty in doing so. Some have pronounced the task impossible. However, it is not. All who possess the will may succeed through unremitting persistence of purpose, maintaining a steadfast determination that they will not, under any circumstances, permit themselves to lose the vital fluid, while instructing the mind upon retiring to sleep as if anticipating an adversary, and thus persisting night and day. For some, this mastery may require years, whereas others can conquer it in a short time. And when they begin to achieve this, it must affect the appetite, for at least 7/8 of all nourishment consumed by man is dissipated through sexual channels. Therefore, when that depletion is arrested, a lesser quantity of sustenance is required to maintain the body, in proportion to the previous expenditure in that direction. We have known many individuals who, upon conquering this passion, found it necessary to partake of but one meal a day, consisting solely of pure vegetables and abstaining entirely from animal products. Nevertheless, arduous labor would naturally increase the demand for sustenance. Those who lead this life must study diligently to adjust the supply to the demand. In a word, they must establish an equilibrium. The attainment of this balance will produce a sense of satisfaction, repose, and harmony, such as is necessary to yield the finest intellectual and spiritual fruits, and to harmonize the soul with God, or the causal world. Without this union, there will be darkness and confusion, which is the primary cause of all mental, moral, and physical disease. Involution and evolution. Involution is that law of thought formation operating through the movements of the planets of our solar system, whose activities descend into terrestrial conditions and find expression in the forms of all life, animal, vegetable, and mineral. Thus, we come to discern the nature of the incarnate thought by its form and quality. We determine the character of individuals, and we judge their physical and mental attributes by means of the hair, the eyes, the fingernails, the skin, and the organic structure of the body and brain. Should we find the physical frame coarse, the bone structure large, the animalistic functions of the brain predominant, and the capacity for reason deficient, we may determine that the organic quality is crude and situated upon a lower plane. Furthermore, the general mental attributes may be discerned through an examination of the fingernails and the hair. Should the nails prove thick and robust, we understand that the intellectual faculties are somewhat coarse, strong, and aligned primarily with the physical domain. Conversely, if the nails are thin and flexible, it betokens a delicate and sensitive neural architecture, accompanied by mental operations of equal refinement and vigor. Coarse hair implies a tendency toward generalized thought, materialistic inclinations, and somewhat unrefined sensibilities. Nevertheless, numerous individuals within the sphere of the fine arts possess such hair. In these instances, their aesthetic sensibilities pertain to the perception and appreciation of the physical world. Conversely, exceptionally fine hair denotes highly delicate sensibilities, alongside a refined capacity for mental discrimination and cognitive awareness. All such characteristics must be carefully calibrated, and their qualities evaluated in accordance with their proximity to these two polar extremes. Straight hair signifies a directness of character and conduct, as well as an equable temperament. Curly hair, by contrast, portends mutability, obliquity of character, vacillation in thought and emotion, and frequently a heightened susceptibility to excitability. All thought formations interact reciprocally, reproducing after their own kind under the law of generation, which constitutes a primary method of creation. These intellectual principles undergo a continuous evolution and refinement until they attain a state of maturity which, among the highest echelons of humanity, elevates them above the dictates of carnal creation. Thereupon, the intuitive faculty commences to govern and instruct these advanced souls regarding the necessity of regulating and subjugating physical generation. Through this progressive discipline, the spiritual nature aligns itself with the causal realm, thereby liberating these individuals from the necessity of further involvement in material existence. When an individual succeeds in conquering the passionate nature, he is elevated into and becomes conjoined with that immortal state to which Jesus, in his teachings, so frequently alluded. Yet, this attainment is reserved solely for the most spiritually mature inhabitants of our planet. For as long as water continues to flow through the streams and waterways of the earth, physical generation will persist. Throughout every stage and degree of evolutionary unfoldment, this generative law will remain the governing force over all, save for those select few capable of overcoming its influence, as Jesus declared when queried upon the matter. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. Man's triune nature. In his organic constitution, man exists as a trinity. First, spirit; second, body; and third, soul, the latter being the development of the physical body through the agency of the spirit. Spirit, which is the pure emanation from the divine, or the causal realm, aggregates to itself material elements, thereby fashioning a physical vehicle through the medium of the parental life essences. This body is constituted of thought crystallizations active within the minds of the parents at, and immediately prior to, the moment of conception. Consequently, the incarnate thought of the parents at that juncture is so vividly impressed upon the child's nature that the zodiacal sign occupied by the earth, as well as the polarity or sign occupied by the moon at the time of birth, reflects the mental state of the more positive parent, whereas the planetary positions delineate the mental condition of the more negative parent, whether father or mother. On occasion, these two conditions are found to be antagonistic to one another. If the child is male, the exterior aspect of his nature will embody the more positive mental condition present at conception, whilst the interior will reflect the more negative. Should the child be female, this order is reversed. The exterior comprises those thoughts arising through the medium of the five senses, whereas the interior nature encompasses the affections, aspirations, and intuitions. Thus, the soul life of the child consists of thought formations derived from both external and internal sources, the body serving as a chemical laboratory utilized by the spirit to transmute or generate thought and soul life. For that which constitutes our conscious individuality is entirely the product of thought formations arising from past experiences and mental states. Any of these three entities, spirit, body, or soul, is capable of assuming dominance, thereby subjugating the remaining two to its dictates. The physical body of the child may be termed a crystallization of thought, and, as it represents the crystallized thoughts of the parents, it frequently exerts a powerful influence over the temperament and mental state of the mother during gestation. Indeed, in those specific attributes wherein the offspring resembles the father, the mother's thoughts, emotions, and even physical appetites are often molded in conformity with those of the father or his ancestral lineage, whose nature the child inherits. In evaluating character, we must first ascertain which of these three natures holds ascendancy. The spirit predominates in the apprehension of invisible causes, whilst the body governs within the realm of the physical senses and the material world. The mental formations, which constitute the soul, are characterized by the dominance of either the spiritual or the physical aspect. In antiquity, the spirit was symbolized by Osiris, the father, the body by Isis, the mother, and the infant child, Horus, held in her arms, born of the conjunction of spirit with matter. This infant child represents the mental formation or the soul. The law of soul marriage. The interior nature of man is feminine. Conversely, the interior nature of woman is masculine. The magnetic and electric emanations of men and women are inverse to one another, analogous to the positive and negative poles of a magnet. Consequently, when the triune being is in harmony between a man and a woman, they are mutually attracted and interblend, achieving a perfect unity of spirit, body, and soul. This union was symbolized in antiquity by the double triangle, which forms a six-pointed star. Such conjunctions, however, cannot be entered into indiscriminately. Nature exhibits a flawless, orderly design, a place for everything, and everything in its proper place. Therefore, by the very order of creation, a specific man and a specific woman belong together. Any departure from this cosmic order engenders discord, and discord inevitably breeds adversity. When a man and a woman who truly belong to one another under this law of order meet, if they are living in alignment with their triune nature, they will inevitably recognize and love each other from that very instant. The prevailing materialistic tendencies of the current age continually encourage the youth to follow their physical senses and even their licentious inclinations. As a consequence, men and women are disinclined to recognize their true companions, being drawn together solely by their sexual sensual nature. Thus, their meeting is merely physical, devoid of any union of either spirit or soul. In these instances, as soon as the fires of passion subside, a mutual repulsion arises between them, culminating in a life of discord and misery. This unhappiness does not terminate with the couple, but is transmitted to their offspring and reflected upon all with whom they associate. And, since all mankind are members of a single, great collective body, it inflicts suffering upon the entire corpus of humanity. Frequently, in delineating human character, we observe that the antagonism existing between parents is embodied within the very nature of their offspring. Many individuals are rendered ineffective or even vicious and criminal due to the conflicting conditions engendered within their own persons by parental influences. This may be readily determined through this system of solar biology by observing which aspects are inharmonious. The selection of partners in marriage. The question of how to discover one's true conjugal mate is of paramount importance. The primary requisite is to establish a harmony of action between spirit, body, and soul, the most vital means of achieving this being habitual chastity. Nevertheless, we must also diligently observe the nature and functions of these three entities within ourselves. Were these three aspects to be brought to perfection, no peril would arise, provided that men and women were permitted the liberty of their own choice. Yet, the instances wherein these natures attain such perfection are exceedingly rare. Nevertheless, this occurs with greater frequency among women than men, owing to the fact that young women are disciplined, from their childhood, to govern their passionate nature, a restraint through which their intuitive faculties are largely matured. Yet, observing men and women in their current state of existence, we may arrive at correct judgments by attending to the following indications. When a young man and woman find themselves in one another's company, they ought to scrutinize their sensations with care, wherein they perceive a powerful magnetic attraction, at times escalating to a mutual passion that nevertheless dissipates shortly after they part. They may rest assured that this is derived solely from mere physical allure, or from the animal nature. When two individuals unite in marriage upon that plane, it inevitably results in discord. Secondly, if, during such association, the couple derives profound intellectual enjoyment without any corresponding sense of the sanctity of the spiritual nature, the outcomes of marriage will be variable, though generally unfavorable in these instances. For, while mental harmony may exist, there may be a lack of compatibility in the chemical compositions of their physical bodies, or an absence of unity in their spiritual essences. Although they may occasionally achieve a tolerable existence by living as brother and sister, the consequences are, on the whole, more deleterious than beneficial. These attractions occasionally arise from birth under an adjacent sign or polarity, and at other times from harmonious planetary configurations, which shall be more comprehensively elucidated hereafter. The third, and perfect, relation is manifested in a sensation of harmony and peace, a profound, tranquil repose, or a quiet gratification in sharing one another's silent company, accompanied by a perception of the sanctity of each other's presence. Even when apart, the contemplation of one another evokes comparable effects. Frequently, where a genuine union of souls exists between two individuals, there will arise a realization of actual presence, and of the sanctity thereof, notwithstanding that their physical bodies are separated by great distances. When this condition prevails, they may remain confident that exquisite harmony and integration will emerge from their triune relationship. Marriages of this nature are rare, indeed exceedingly rare. In delineating character, we frequently encounter men and women who have met these true soul companions but, owing to various circumstances, have been diverted from them and united with others. Such individuals can never be severed in spirit, for the image of that companion will perpetually dwell in their memory, held sacred in their thoughts. The portal of the inner temple of their existence will remain forever barred against all others, and a profound melancholy of the soul will characterize their private lives, despite their endeavors to suppress its outward expression. Frequently, the offspring of parents in this condition will bear the precise likeness of the absent one, so cherished in memory. Although the legal partner may provide the material germ, or the soil in which the child is conceived, it is this ideal beloved, though absent, who infuses the inner essence of the child's being. Thus is the seventh commandment perpetually violated by the majority of mankind. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Often, the intervention of parents in the marriage of their children serves to separate two whom God had joined together. Yet man can sunder only their physical forms, for what God doeth is eternal. Chapter 2. The Mechanism of Solar Biology. The Sun constitutes the center of the solar system. The 7 nearest planets revolving around the central body are designated in the following order. Beginning with that closest to the Sun: Mercury, Venus, Earth or Zenda, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus or Herschel. Mercury completes a single revolution about the Sun in approximately 88 days, Venus in 224 2/3 days, Earth in 365 1/4 days, Mars in 687 days, Jupiter in 11 years 315 days, Saturn in 29 1/2 years, and Uranus in 84 years. These planets correspond to, and are embodiments of, the 7 creative principles of nature, exerting their greatest power and influence when positioned in the 7 vital signs at birth. Mercury in Libra, Venus in Virgo, Earth in Leo, Mars in Cancer, Jupiter in Gemini, Saturn in Taurus, and Uranus in Aries. The signs of the zodiac were discerned by the ancients, who appear to have participated in the respiration of the solar fluid to a far greater degree than the inhabitants of modern times, whose lives and understandings are confined to the more immediate atmosphere of our Earth. It is asserted by the Swedish seer Swedenborg that the event recorded in biblical history as the fall of man was accompanied by a recession from, or loss of, an interior breath, resulting in his alienation and severance from the elemental and exalted states of purity, holiness, and that perpetual intuitive knowledge which had hitherto preserved him within the order and harmony of the heavens. While man persisted in this interior spiritual and solar breath, he dwelt, as it were, in the immediate presence of God, and was marvelously enlightened regarding the nature and properties of the physical heavens, possessing an understanding of how they influenced and affected all animate, and indeed even the ostensibly inanimate objects of the earth. This endowed them with an instinctive comprehension of the qualities and utility of all material things, an intuitive wisdom that governs the lower orders of animate nature without their rational comprehension, though they yield spontaneous obedience to its laws. Retracing our steps to the dawn of history, we encounter mankind in an ignorant and barbarous condition. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.